Okay, let's dive right into this. If you've ever watched a disaster movie or picked up one of those modern prophecy thrillers, you are probably very familiar with the Rapture. You know the scene, right? It's that incredibly dramatic moment where millions of believers suddenly vanish into thin air. They leave behind crumpled clothes, driverless cars crashing into things, and just absolute chaos everywhere. It has a massive cultural footprint. But in today's Explainer, we are going on a really fascinating mission. We're going to investigate the actual biblical and historical origins of this entire concept. We're going to look directly at the specific passages used to support this theology, figure out what passage in the Bible supposedly supports this doctrine, and uncover where the idea actually came from.
Here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, the pop culture rapture. 2, decoding 1 Thessalonians 4. 3, the Matthew 24 mix-up. 4, the 1830s origin story, and 5, escaping versus enduring.
Section 1, the pop culture rapture. For literally decades now, this narrative has absolutely dominated books and movies. It's this pervasive idea that true Christians are going to be snatched up to heaven right before a time of horrific global suffering, while all the unbelievers are just left behind to face the music. And let me tell you, it is an incredibly profitable narrative. The Left Behind book series alone has sold over 65 million copies. That is a staggering number. It shows you exactly how a specific theological concept was completely transformed into a highly profitable prophecy fiction empire.
But that brings us to a massive question, maybe the most important one. Are these dramatic disappearances actually in the Bible? When we really dig into the source material, what passages actually support this doctrine of the rapture? Because, ironically enough, if you look at the book of Revelation, which is practically famous for its end times imagery, you will not find the word rapture or any description of believers suddenly vanishing anywhere in the text. Nowhere.
Section 2, decoding 1 Thessalonians 4. So if it's not in Revelation, where is it? Well, the absolute primary pillar of rapture theology is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. This is the famous text where the Apostle Paul writes about believers being caught up in the clouds. For over a century, a lot of people have pictured a literal, secret evacuation into heaven based entirely on this one passage. But we have to step back and ask, what does meeting the Lord in the air actually mean? To figure this out, we have to shift our whole paradigm from a modern, literal reading to an ancient contextual understanding. We need to look at the exact words Paul was actually using.
Paul uses this specific Greek word, parousia, to describe the Lord's return. Now, in the 1st century Roman Empire, a parousia was a formal state visit by a king, an emperor, or a high-ranking dignitary to a colony or city. This wasn't some quiet event. It was a massive, highly orchestrated civic celebration that Paul's original ancient audience would have instantly recognized. Notice how perfectly this ancient sequence maps right onto Paul's imagery. First, a trumpet sounds to announce the arrival. Second, the town's VIPs and leading citizens actually leave the city gates. Third, they meet the dignitary out on the road, or, in Paul's very poetic metaphor, in the air. And fourth, and this is crucial, they don't go away on a vacation together. They escort the king right back into the city to establish his rule and his justice. Paul is clearly using the imagery of a royal welcoming committee here, absolutely not a secret evacuation plan.
As the acclaimed theologian N.T. Wright points out, Paul is awfully good at mixed metaphors. He is purposefully blending images here, from Moses descending the mountain, from Daniel's visions of the clouds, and from the Roman emperor's parousia. And he's doing all of this to comfort a community that is actively grieving their dead. He's assuring them that their loved ones will get VIP status when the true king returns to earth.
Section 3, the Matthew 24 mix-up. Okay, so the second major proof text used to support the rapture is over in Matthew 24. This is where Jesus says 2 men will be in a field, one is taken and the other is left. Now the modern assumption is that being taken means you are saved and whisked away to heaven, while being left behind means you're doomed to suffer the tribulation. But hold on, consider the ancient context. Just verses earlier, Jesus explicitly compares this exact event to the days of Noah. Think about the flood story for a second. Who was taken? The wicked were taken away by the flood waters of judgment. Who was left behind? Noah and his family. In this ancient context, being left behind is exactly what you want. It literally means you are spared.
And Jesus actually replies with a pretty sobering reality in the parallel passage in Luke 17. The disciples explicitly ask Jesus where these people are being taken, and his response? Where there is a dead body, there the vultures will gather. Being taken meant being swept away in death and judgment. This completely dismantles the foundational misunderstanding of that entire left-behind theology.
Section 4, the 1830s origin story.
So, if this idea of a pre-tribulation rapture isn't actually rooted in 1 Thessalonians, and it's definitely not in Matthew 24, where in the world did this doctrine originate? Well, the timeline of this theology is actually remarkably recent. For the first 1,800 years of Christian history, the concept of a secret rapture essentially didn't exist at all. It was systematized around 1830 by a man named John Nelson Darby. From there, it was injected into mainstream American evangelicalism through the footnotes of the Schofield Reference Bible in 1909. Decades later, Hal Lindsey popularized it in the 1970s, which paved the exact path for the Left Behind series blowing up in the 90s.
What Darby actually invented back in the 1830s is a highly complex theological framework known as dispensational premillennialism. Sounds like a mouthful, right? But basically, this framework divides human history into distinct eras, or dispensations. To explain why the world was still broken and the second coming seemed to be so delayed, Darby proposed this brand new idea of a two-stage return of Jesus. First, a secret rapture just for the church, followed by years of tribulation, and then finally a visible return to earth.
But how on earth did such a totally new idea become so universally accepted? Well, Cyrus Schofield embedded Darby's brand new theories directly into the footnotes of his very own study Bible. By doing this, it presented this new framework with the authoritative, heavy tone of academic scholarship, and it took off like wildfire. Within a decade, it sold 1 million copies, and by the end of World War II, it hit 2 million. It literally hardwired rapture theology directly into American evangelical culture.
Section 5. Escaping versus enduring.
So why does any of this mathematical contrast here is just stark? Under modern rapture theology, the physical earth is essentially viewed as doomed for destruction, and the believer's ultimate role is simply escaping to heaven. It's a very escapist mindset. But under historical theology, which is the view held by the church for the vast majority of its history, the earth is slated for ultimate renewal. And the believer's role? It's not to run away. It's to endure hardship, deeply care for creation, and steward the world as they anticipate the king's return to finally set things right.
This absolutely reframes the entire biblical narrative. The overarching story of these texts isn't about God abandoning his creation. It's about God making his permanent home on a restored earth. The king doesn't return to take his people away from a broken planet. He returns to heal the world and to transform his people so they can rule alongside him.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If our ultimate goal isn't to escape a broken earth in some secret rapture, how does that fundamentally change the way we live in, invest in, and care for our world today? Understanding the actual history of our beliefs isn't just about getting the facts right. It's about shifting how we show up in the present moment. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it sparks some serious curiosity for you.